265 839 265. Bronx Talk. There's an upheaval going on in our state legislature with the corruption indictment of Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver and his forced resignation. The attention now turns to his successor. Indications from Albany are, and this is late-breaking news from Monday afternoon, the Bronx's own Carl Hastie, the assemblyman from the 83rd District and chair of the Bronx County Democratic Committee, has enough votes to be unanimously elected as the next Speaker of the New York State Assembly when they vote tomorrow morning, Tuesday, at 11 a.m. If Mr. Hastie does, in fact, ascend to be the Speaker, it would provide a rare opportunity of access to power for Bronx legislators, potentially a significant moment for all of us in the Bronx. There are many questions to ask, many angles to examine, and we've got several guests who are in Albany lined up to address many of those issues. You can email questions or comments to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. We will speak with Bronx Assembly members Jeff Dinowitz, Louis Sepulveda, and Richard Picciotto, and we will also have David King, who's a top-flight Albany reporter who has written extensively about this and other issues in state government. So we will start off this evening with Assemblyman Jeff Dinowitz from the 81st Assembly District. Assemblyman, how are you tonight?
Great. How are you, Kevin?
Are you doing great because you're excited that it certainly appears that your colleague and your Bronx colleague, Carl Hastie, is ready to be the Speaker in the City Council, in the Assembly? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that answer. Did we get... Oh, we don't have him. All right. So what should we do? Should we take a very short break and then we'll go get the Assemblyman back? We'll take a short break, we'll get the Assemblyman back, and then we'll be right back with you. Don't go away. More coming up.
I feel like I owe it to the city.
Goodness.
I'm determined. It's gonna happen. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend. I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science. After that, I'm going to get my law degree. Then I'm going to come back to Detroit, boost the economy, become the mayor or something, try to make the situation better for other people. I feel like I owe it to the city. I'm determined. It's going to happen. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
All right, I'm sorry for those technical difficulties. Apparently, we do have Assemblyman Dinowitz with us. Assemblyman, so you said you were happy tonight. Is that because one of your colleagues is about to ascend to be Speaker of the Assembly? Uh-oh. I'm not hearing him. I don't know if he's responding. You know, I'm sorry to have to do this, but I have a feeling we need to shut down for a moment, and we will come back as soon as we can get it on. Don't go away. We'll be right back. More Bronx Talk coming up. Oh, he's there now?
I'm here.
Ah, there we go. They leave me here floating without a paddle. Assemblyman So, are you happy because Carl Hastie is becoming Speaker of the Assembly, or it certainly appears so?
I am thrilled because Carl is, first of all, he's a Bronxite, but secondly, Carl is somebody with whom I've worked very closely over the past number of years. I've seen him in action. I've seen how he works with other people, and I believe he will be an excellent speaker. And, of course, the fact that he's from the Bronx makes it even more exciting.
Let's talk about some of the ideas that are floating out there that people are saying, well, you know what, we've had this terrible thing that's happened with our previous speaker. Nobody wants to see that repeated again. What has the dialogue been like to try and move things forward so that we don't repeat where we've been with Shelley Silver?
Well, there are a lot of potential reform proposals out there, but I think the focus really has been on electing a new speaker and electing a good speaker. I think Carl has demonstrated, first by the fact that he was able to put together the votes so quickly, that he has the support and confidence of all of our colleagues, and that's very important. As we're entering into the budget negotiations, we have to be a unified Democratic conference in the Assembly. We have to speak with one voice, and we've entrusted in Carl Hastie to do just that. He is our voice. He's the voice of all 106 Democrats in the Assembly. And I think
I want to get back to the reform question in a moment, but you talked about the process. Many people are saying, you know what? If we left a situation that was not very transparent, we're now in a situation where basically we changed the rules, or we changed what we had originally planned. There seems to be less transparency in the Assembly, and while I understand that you and certainly many people in the Bronx would be excited that things were moved up and now he's gotten the votes, but you know, there didn't seem to be a very open process. Once again, it was all done behind closed doors. Kathy Nolan, although she did back off and, you know, ultimately agreed not to run, said, you know, I still don't feel like this was the kind of process that speaks to the word democracy.
Well, you know, this wasn't a Democratic primary. This was an election for Speaker. If you look at any other election for Speaker on the federal level or on the state level, it essentially is a contest where you have members of the party conference, in this case 105 people actually, talking to each other, candidates talking to the members, and it doesn't necessarily play out at a public forum. It plays out over the telephone, at caucus meetings, and in different ways. And I think it's been a very democratic process in that everybody's had who wanted to run has had their opportunity. You know, there's no written rules as to how this is done. It doesn't happen all that often. My recollection was the last time there was an election for Speaker was also a very quick process. You know, the public doesn't get a vote in this process. The public gets a vote through their Assembly members. The editorial boards don't get a vote. You know, it's interesting that some of the editorial boards were complaining that this is happening too fast. It was just a week or so ago that they wanted Speaker Silver out as quickly as possible. Then it was okay to do something quickly, but the bottom line is the newspapers don't determine the timetable. The members determine the timetable. Anybody has the right to run, and it's just a matter of who can get the support. And Carl, by getting this support so quickly, I think demonstrated extraordinary political skill. And a lot of the political skill has to do with the fact that he has good people skills. People like him. People who he's worked with like working with him. They trust him. They believe him. And I can tell you that as the county leader in the Bronx, he has been very open. He listens to people. Doesn't always tell people what they want to hear. Doesn't always agree with them. Doesn't always do what they want, but always listen to them. And that's what people want in a leader, somebody who they can go to and at least feel like they're getting a fair hearing.
You know, one of the things, and I've interviewed him, I've mentioned it a number of times leading up to this. He's been on our show 9 times since 2000. He's always been a very willing and open guest. Even if there were some difficult situations with elected officials, I certainly have no complaints about his interaction with me. Many people said that he's not been very open with the press and also has not been very prolific as somebody who writes bills and passes legislation. Do you have a sense of where he stands on vital issues that are going to come up, whether it be immigration, whether it be charter schools, whether it be, health care reform? I mean, in a way, we haven't really heard a lot of policy statements from Mr. Hastie. What can you tell us about it, and/or is that a concern for you?
Well, first of all, in terms of the press, he's not what I would call a publicity hound. He's not one of those that has a Sunday morning press conference every week. Some people do that, and that's fine, and some people don't. He's one of those people who does not do that. He's not always looking to get his name or his picture in the newspaper. As far as policies, I know where he stands on some issues, but not necessarily every issue. But ultimately, the Speaker of the Assembly, for the most part, is going to take a position that reflects the views of the members of the Democratic Conference. Shelley Silver certainly did that. I know, you may think you know where he stands on an issue, but ultimately, he's kind of like, the Speaker is our representative. A representative when they go to negotiate a budget or when they negotiate other legislation. Despite the complaints about 3 men in a room, it's kind of difficult to have 214 people in a room when you're negotiating. So my belief is that on a lot of key issues, he will reflect the view of certainly the majority of the members of our conference on a given issue. And we know where he stands on some issues because he's cast votes on some of them. Certainly on the DREAM Act, as an example, which is Board of Immigration, as one example. He's been on what I consider the right side of most issues.
Governor Cuomo today said that he would not sign this will be the last question for you, sir, said he would not sign a budget deal if things like more oversight on per diems are addressed, more transparency on campaign donations. Do you have the stomach for that kind of ethics reform in the state, and is that the kind of thing you would urge the new speaker to work on?
First, I agree with the position that the governor took today on most of those issues. I'm not sure why it has to be done in the budget, since most of it doesn't relate in any way, shape, or form to the budget, but that's okay. That's one way governors nowadays try to get things done. I do think there has to be some changes in how the per diems are handled, but I don't think we should eliminate per diems. That's ridiculous. Some of the other suggestions that the governor came up with today, I agree with most of them. The campaign finance reform, I've always been a supporter of campaign finance reform and public financing, although recently I do have some questions in light of the Citizens United case, where basically you have all these independent expenditures which render the public financing virtually meaningless. But I do think we have to deal with most of these issues. There's no question about it.
Assemblyman, I'm going to cut you off because we have other guests waiting. I do want to thank you for taking the time on this busy night in Albany for being with us. And I'm sure when you're back in the Bronx, we'll have further dialogue on these and other issues. Thank you, Assemblyman Jeff Dinowitz.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. I believe next up is, we were talking about David King, who is a wonderful reporter for Gotham Gazette. David, are you with us?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Gary.
David, nice to have you, and congratulations on and I want to tell our viewers, GothamGazette.com, and you can read some very thorough and very well-researched articles about Carl Hastie. Give me an idea of the sort of speaker, assuming the vote goes as is predicted tomorrow, the kind of speaker you think Mr. Hastie will be.
Well, I guess we're sort of hearing two conflicting stories. One is what we know about how Carl has handled himself in the past as a leader and consensus builder, and that he's remained sort of a quiet candidate, a quiet legislator since 2000, and doesn't speak to the press much and keeps to himself. And in that respect, he's very much like Sheldon Silver, who we never really got a lot of insight into his motivation on big issues like congestion pricing and some other key city issues. And on the other hand, we hear, that he is interested in reform. He's interested in opening up the process to some members to members who maybe wouldn't have the power because they're inexperienced and wouldn't be able to introduce legislation. But at this point, it's hard to tell what side he would actually deliver on, or if he'd be a mixture of both.
How much of a concern for you are the things that you wrote about today? And that was things like campaign contributions from pharmaceutical companies, and you drew a line between that and some of his, legislative activities. How big is that now? Or do you think right now it's very difficult to do those kinds of things, given what just happened to Shelley Silver, and whether Mr. Hasty or anybody else is the new speaker, they're just not going to be able to do those things because the spotlight is on?
The truth is that there's nothing in my article that is described as illegal in Albany. The process that he used and followed in getting donations, Albany, the laws are really pretty lax and allow for a lot of things. So the idea that he sponsored a bill that pharmacies were happy with, and then they sort of organized to pay him back with, give us a campaign account quite a bit of money, and 32 donations from pharmacies in one day isn't necessarily illegal unless it was quid pro quo, and it's pretty hard to prove that. This is really just typical of the way Albany functions, and I think the concern is that after Sheldon Silver, we've sort of seen that Albany needs to change, and so is Carl going to change his behavior and be more transparent with his fundraising and the way he uses per diems and things like that, or is he going to keep that behavior in place and protect members who want to do it themselves? I think Preet Bharara has made it pretty clear that he's looking to Albany for just about everything. So certainly this behavior might lead to more investigation.
Do you think we're on the way toward the end of Three Men in a Room, and that many of the members will feel like they have more input into what goes on and what decisions are ultimately made, by the legislature?
Well, it's hard to say. Obviously, members enjoy a certain bit of freedom and power with the situation in not in legislating, but in what they get away with campaigning and staying in office. Changing things might make it harder for them to get reelected, and it might expose them to more scrutiny. So it's not clear that everyone wants that kind of reform, and it's not just on the Assembly or the Senate. Right now, it's controlled by the Senate Republicans by a 2-vote majority, and they are dead set against campaign finance reform, public financing of elections, and just aren't too keen on the idea of any more ethics reforms, despite what Governor Cuomo asked for today. The Senate Republicans seem to be pretty unreceptive to what he put forward.
Well, one of the things that Mr. Hasty himself has said is that he would develop a task force in fighting for reforms and promoting greater transparency. He'd create an Office of Ethics and Compliance that would provide guidance to lawmakers on existing income and ethics rules. Number one, do you think that's realistic? And number two, is that the kind of reform that, number one, would keep voters happy, but number two, more importantly, would be effective?
Well, I think it's sort of telling that one of the reforms he's proposing is an office to tell members how to continue to be ethical. They get ethics training every year, and I think a lot of these things that people have been caught doing are pretty common sense. So I wouldn't say that in office telling legislators whether they're violating ethics laws or not is particularly revolutionary. And obviously the governor himself is quite fond of commissions, studying a problem, but a lot of the time we never actually see solutions. Good government groups are calling for the revamp of the Legislative Ethics Commission that looks into misbehavior by legislators, and it tends to be very secretive. And it's something like that where the Assembly has to be willing to give up a little bit of their secrecy, give up a little bit of their ability to sweep things under the carpet, to show people that they're working in good faith.
Real quick, do you think they're ready to do that? Do you think legislators have had enough and ready to do that?
It doesn't seem that way. In the way that this election took place so quickly with Mr. Hasty being sort of swept into the office without going through sort of these public talks about what needs reforming. It's been so swift that it seems like members want to get back to the way things were.
That's very interesting. David King, thank you so much, and thank you for your very insightful and, as I mentioned earlier, well-researched work. I will urge all our viewers, he's written 2 fantastic articles that you can see right on the homepage of Gotham Gazette, gothamgazette.com, and you can read the 2 very interesting articles about the legislature and who looks like the new speaker, Carl Hasty. David, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, we go to one of the assembly districts in the Bronx. It is Victor Pichardo. I forget which number district, Assemblyman. What's the number of your district so I don't embarrass myself?
Gary, it's the 86.
Yeah, the 86, right? All right. Anyway, as one of the younger members, I guess this is your sophomore campaign, your sophomore season, as it were. Talk to me about your perspective. I'm going to assume that you're pretty happy that Carl Hasty is online to be the new speaker.
To be quite honest, Gary, I'm just glad that the process is over and that the Assembly can carry on the business that our respective constituencies elected us to do. This week has been, very painful. It's been very difficult, and I am glad that Assemblymember Hasty was elected because he's one of our own. He's from the Bronx, and in his election or presumed election into Speaker is going to be historic, not only for the state of New York but also for the country. One of the first, if not the first, African American or a member of the minority community being elected as Speaker in the state assembly and potentially anywhere else in the country. I would have to check that, but I'm pretty sure it's a safe assumption to say that.
Well, that's an interesting fact and certainly worthwhile, and he should be celebrated for that. There's no doubt. But the implications of that would suggest that he understands what urban people are like, what people of color are like, and what they need to do better in the state of New York. Have you had any conversations with him, or do you have any sense of what kinds of policies and what kinds of things we're going to see from him that will, kind of emphasize, the importance of the fact that he is the first black speaker in the state?
In my experience in working with Assemblymember Hasty, as he's the chair of the Bronx Democratic County Committee, and being a part of the Assembly delegation, Carl, his first inclination is to listen and to build consensus. And in my experience in working with him, he's not a man who chases the spotlight. He is about the work. And that is something that I've always respected about Carl. He's not the loudest, the most boisterous. He's more of to use a football metaphor, he's very much like a Tony Dungy type coach, where he doesn't make a lot of noise, but he still inspires his players, so to speak, and that's the type of leadership that we need. We don't need someone necessarily who's boisterous and is about themselves, but rather about the work. And to be quite honest, as you said earlier, Gary, I'm very happy that Assemblymember Hasty is presumably going to be the next speaker, but it's more important the fact that he cares about the work and everything, about building consensus and figuring out a way forward versus creating animosity amongst members and even colleagues.
Talk to me about, before we let you go, talk to me about what policies or what's important to you and the people in your district that you want to see the speaker work on, or that you want to communicate to him about, so that you can move the people in the 86 a little farther forward.
Well, first of all, a big thing for me as a Latino elected official would be to push the DREAM Act. I think we have a lot of potential within our young men and women who, not necessarily have the documentation proving that they're citizens, but are citizens in every way, shape, or form. So giving them the opportunity to seek an education is personally important to me, but also to a grand majority of the constituency that I represent. And also about economic development and economic mobility. And, a great portion of the folks that I represent either live below or on the poverty line and are minimum wage workers. And we need to move the conversation from being just a minimum wage to a livable wage. And I think Assemblymember Hasey has been on the right side of that. He's been on the right side of the DREAM Act, and I look forward to working with him now as the capacity of the Speaker in making sure that our communities have a voice and are represented in the Assembly and elsewhere.
Assemblyman, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it, and we certainly would look forward to having you right here in the studio with us when you get back to New York.
Gary, thank you so much.
Okay, great. So now we have Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda with us, right? That's correct? Do we have Assemblyman Sepulveda? Do we have him? All right. Assemblyman, nice to have you with us. You were one of the Democrats who was maybe a little hesitant about just endorsing Mr. Hasty and endorsing this process. In fact, you were signed on to a whole series of reforms. Are you satisfied right now that we're on the way to getting those reforms?
I wouldn't characterize it as hesitant, Gary. The thing is that before any candidates were announced, a group of Assembly members and I came together, about between 25 and 35, depending on the day, and we started talking about substantive reforms that we wanted to implement before we got to the question of a speaker. And I made that clear to Carl that to me it would be a great honor to have an assemblyman from the Bronx being the speaker, someone who understands what happens economically, educationally in the Bronx, and can sort of pinpoint more resources to improve that. So I think this would be great for the Bronx. But it wasn't that I was hesitant. It was that we really wanted reforms, have the conversation begin with all the candidates. And to Carl's credit, he did meet with the group. And I think most of the people there, if not all, were satisfied with some of the things that he proposed and he promised that he would do.
You were concerned, and one of the items in the letter that you and other Assembly members had written was about chairmanships, and that committee chairs and others were chosen by the Speaker, and it basically was, a top-down system. Are you satisfied with your conversations with Mr. Hasty that these kinds of things will provide greater access for other Assembly members?
You have some members in our conference who have certain levels of expertise that can provide information, a different point of view. For example, I'm an attorney. I am the only Hispanic attorney in the entire state legislature. So I can provide some pearls of wisdom as a practitioner for the law committee. There are teachers that are assembly persons. We have a pharmacist. These are people that bring a different perspective to committees, and we don't want the fact that we haven't been in the Assembly for 10, 15 years before they can ascend to a chairmanship of a committee. So that's one of the things. Gary, let me tell you something that hasn't been mentioned as much, that I think would go a long way in increasing the level of transparency in the Assembly. And it's to revamp the technology that we have. It's old, and it doesn't serve the purpose for us to notify our constituents. We have a legislative retrieval system that the public doesn't have access to.
And real quick, you're hopeful now that we're on the way to changing it, or do you still think there's work to do to lobby through Albany to make that happen?
Well, we asked Carl today, the committee, and Carl's met with several committees, but he met with the reform committee, for lack of a better name. And when we said to him, we need to revamp the technology so people have access to what legislation we're proposing, the world will know what we're doing. And Carl, before we finish our sentence, his credit said, done. I will do that. So we're pleased. We had both candidates come before the committee, and not because he's now the Speaker.